So here's the thing. Canada just lost to Argentina 2-0 in the opening game of the Copa America. Like, so what does that mean? Well, let's talk about it. So again, guys, thank you for stopping by. We are the Africans, we do primarily Canadian African content. We're looking at the Copa Americas. We got Canada playing it, and Canada just lost to the defending world champs and defending Copa America champions 2-0 with goals scored by Julian Alvarez in the 49th minute and Arturo Martinez in the 88th minute. What did we learn here? I think the first thing is you have to acknowledge the opponent. Argentina is the best in the world. And there's a lot of ways you can start to look at this and talk about this. I think there are times that Canada look like they belong on a pitch, and there are times where they was just messy in alone, messy in alone, messy in alone. They got so many saves from Crepo. We'll get to him in a minute. But Argentina is the number one team in the world. But Canada was able to hold their own. There's a reason why I think most people have Argentina winning this tournament. And it's more than valid when you see how they played on the pitch. Again, there were moments where they looked like Canada was playing with them, and there were other moments where they were just picking them apart. The highlight. That's what you get when you play high quality teams. If they see what you're doing, eventually they're going to start to pick away at it. And we saw just opportunities after opportunities, which ultimately ended in 2 goals. So Argentina looks good. They look like right now they're my pick to win the Copa, just based how they will do it. Canada made them earn it. There's no doubt. At the same time, do I give credits for the saves or do I talk about the breakdowns? So let's acknowledge that Argentina is the top team in the world for a reason. If you want to be the Canadian optimist, you can say, and Canada only limited them to 2 goals, even though felt like there were 17 odd man rushes, 33 breakaways, and Maxime Crépeau coming up big. That's the first thing. Secondly, I think with Maxime Crépeau, there is a conversation that doesn't need to be had. He is the number one goalkeeper. But outside of Crépeau, maybe Cornelius. Maybe a player like, I don't think Davies had a bad game. I know there were moments where people would say, ugh, but I think Davies had a solid game. I don't know what has happened with the squad, but it's something they haven't mentioned. No one is in form. That's the reality. No one is in form right now. Tejan isn't in form, and I think that's a very real conversation we need to ask, because who else do we have who can play out there? If it's going to be Schaffelberg, that's fine. But then who else are we going to insert and put in? Is it going to be an Ali Ahmed? Is it going to be... is it going to be Jonathan Osorio that you put out there? Is it going to be a Jason Russell Rowe that you put there because maybe he can give you some pace and he can cut in and be an additional trio up top of strikers? But they don't have players who are in form right now. I made a reference on a tweet. I think Kone played like Smash Williams when the recruiter came to see him at Friday Night Lights for the Dillon Panthers. That's a deep cut because we're in North America here, and ultimately, it's a conversation where I don't think the stage got too big for him, but I think this is not one of his better games. And with no one in good form, not many people in good form, right? For some reason, Jonathan David hasn't been able to translate his game play, his scoring at club to Canada in the last little bit. Kyle Larin is 3 to 4 chances before he gives you a quality chance, maybe an opportunity. Eustáquio isn't playing well. He's not in form. The best players who were in form on the side should have been Davies, should have been Bombito, should have been Crépeau, should have been coming off a solid year, Alistair Johnston. But outside of those players, no one else was playing very well. Liam Miller, you expect a little bit more, but again, there isn't much depth. This is where I had that podcast where I asked, what is the ambition of this team? I think for what they are, there's a conversation that can be had that says they can play with the top teams in the world. Yes, no one's going to take that away from them. But how does that actually look, right? Am I going to celebrate a 1-0 victory or a 1-0 defeat where they've only let in one goal, but their goalie had to come up big and save multiple breakaways, multiple odd man rushes? Is that great defensively, or is that defensively just a sieve? I made the reference that it felt like in many ways they look like Swiss cheese, which is why I was saying maybe put the midfield, add another player to the midfield to give you a little bit more resistance coming in. But there's no one really here in form. Now, either Jesse Marsh has to look and say, okay, I'm going to find players who can play well, have been playing well recently, and get them onto the pitch to see what they can do. But there's still a gap, right? In terms of once Argentina decided, I'm going to say this, but yeah, once Argentina decided to flip that switch and start to attack even more, you saw the difference. You saw the difference in the level, right? There's a level that few Canadians can play at when you're playing with the top players in the world, right? Davies is someone you expect to be able to do that. That might be the list, right? Maxime Crépeau, I trust this man in any one-on-one situation with a breakaway. I trust that man. I trust that man with my life. But there's a reality where when the level goes up, it feels like Canada isn't at the level. When they step up in competition, it feels like Canada is not at the level. And I think that is something that needs to be addressed, because if we are going to be played, we're about to host the World Cup. And if the ambition is to be a top team in the world, again, we're in the 50s right now. I'm not saying we're going to change it around in 2 days. The conversation of, can we get more players at the level? The MLS is a fine league. It is not the league. It's a league it's a league that can be scrappy. It's a league that can create promising prospects every once in a while, but it is a scrappy physical league. And scrappy physical can only get you so far in leagues, especially in international competitions. In CONCACAF, it can get you far enough. Once you start to play top teams, the amount of odd man rushes, the amount of things, even just the 1-2s, the wing play, putting into space, you're playing some of the best players in the world. The space that you think you have, you don't. You have to react almost before it happens so that you are on time. And it's nothing against. I think that's why it was important for them to play the likes of the Netherlands, the likes of France, because you have to see what the level is. And even against all three, it felt like, okay, from Netherlands to France, I wouldn't even say both games were that different. The only difference was they got saves and maybe looked more dangerous against France. But that also brings another point within this game, which is we'll say that to the third point, because it does flow into that. But no one is in form, and this system kind of does leaves a few holes. The other thing is it does leave holes in the midfield. You can still play a pressing type system. You can go with that 4-2-2-2, but it's not even the 4-2-2-2 or the 4-4-2. I think with two players in the midfield, if you're going to play ultimately what looks like a 4-2-4, you cannot survive against top teams with no midfield. And that's where I think Marsh has to make a decision and decide, are we just going to play fully countered, or do we trust Kyle Laren's touch and hold up play to keep them afloat when they send the ball up to get the attack to reach him? I think of the two options, you go with David. Nothing against Laren. Laren had good moments against Argentina, but if you're going to try to play in transition with speed, just go with speed. I'd rather take off a Laren and put in an Ali Ahmed or a Mathieu Choignard, put them in the midfield so you can go more of that traditional 4-2-3-1. Maybe that means you push Kone further up the pitch or Eustáquio up the pitch, whoever it may be. You play someone there, and then now you try to play that counter with speed where you have Miller on one side, you have Tejon on the other side, you have David up top, Alfonso and Alistair can overlap. It gives you the options. But I think you have to look at the midfield. especially if you know you're going to be defending. I don't know how they now react against a team like Chile and then Peru. I wonder how much possession they expect to have. However, I think at the end of the day, you need a third player in the midfield to give you a chance. The defense was fine. I hate that I've jokingly told one of my friends we're becoming the recovery speed merchants, which is fine, but recovery speed just to me builds bad habits in terms of angles and defending. You have to be aware just because you can run down someone doesn't mean someone doesn't understand leverage and angles and getting behind you. It helps to have it, but I mean, seeing Bombito and Cornelius getting beats on long balls where it's 1-on-V1 with the keeper, just because you're fast, you also have to be aware. And that happened too much. Now, maybe that's just some they're playing a high line, and once Argentina got comfortable with that, they were just picking their spots and just threading through. So there's no one in form. It's encouraging for what we've seen, but it is a concern. Which goes to my number 3 point, which is there are far too many what ifs. Before the game, I was having a banter with one of the followers, and the conversation was, how many big chances are they going to create? Right? And I said they'll have moments. They'll have a run here, a nice 1-2 by the box, but I need a goal. I need something. I can't live off of, we held this team scoreless for a half, and everything's looking great. I can't live off of that. And there's a reality of this is what it is. I've called these games the Belgium games, right? And for those of you who aren't aware, the Belgium game is the game that Canada played against Belgium in the World Cup, where they looked great on the ball. They did everything but score, right? They gave up one opportunity to Belgium, and then Belgium got the 1-0 victory. And that was it. And with Marsh, he's had good halves. He's had scoreless halves, which is a very big difference. But he's had games where all of a sudden they can create, and they looked good against top teams. They're everything but the finish, right? They're everything but the finish, and that is a concern. I will continue to say this: when you play top teams, with all due respect, you're not going to get 5, 6, 7 major chances. I know probably Canada's going to look very good on the XG somehow, but for the amount of chances that they have, quality chances, you have to bury one. At least one. Whether it's Eustachio 1v1 with Martinez, whether it's Laren not able to get to the end of one, they had at least 4 or 5 solid opportunities, and they came up empty. And when you're playing teams that have quality, you have to bury your chances, because the second that they get one, the game is over. And that happened today. There's a goal drought within the nines, right? David's not scoring. Laren is having moments but not finishing. It's a concern. Because if you think Canada can get out of this group, where are the goals coming from right now? Right? If it's not the nines, okay. David, for some reason, isn't in great form for Canada. David had a free header that he put wide. That's got to be on frame, let alone that should have been scored. Right? Kyle Laren had other good opportunities where he cuts in and gets to the space but isn't able to get the ball past the keeper. You have to finish those. Right? So if your nines aren't scoring, so then where else are you going to look? Well, maybe it's in the midfield. Laren isn't giving you, Tejan isn't giving you much, because the reality is Tejan's not in good form. So Tejan might give you a moment, but Tejan doesn't have the motion, he doesn't have the reps right now to be confident in terms of what he's trying to do. Now, do I expect Kone to have a bounce back? I hope so. Eustachio, again, also not enough reps. Does that mean you have to play with the lineup? I would love to see it. I don't know if he does. I know people are calling for Schaffelberg to start. I wouldn't start him, but I might be quicker to turn to him. I think that's the one thing today I would have loved to see. I would have loved to see, I posted this on X. I said I would love to have seen maybe go an Ahmed for Laren right off the bat. That way you go a third player in the midfield and you can either push Kone up and maybe that gets him going, or you place other players around. I'm not against Schavelberg starting, but I think he provides you enough. He's someone who gives you that. So I wouldn't necessarily start him, but I'd be quicker to pull the trigger, say, on Miller or Buchanan at halftime immediately in the first 45. If nothing's happening in the first 45, make the switch. Bring him on, right? That's what I would look to do. And that just comes down to like the next part, which is what are you getting? How much will he actually tinker and experiment with, Marsh, that is? Because we've had so many what if moments. Like, again, it's the third game of the Jesse Marsh era. And I think for me, and I said this, I'm going to wait for about 6 to 7 games before I really lay into it. But there is a reality where you just haven't scored. Today was encouraging, there's no doubt. There were great opportunities, great chances that you would expect players to put those away. Now, either they had a bad game finishing, or I go worst case scenario, and I say the players that we relied on to make the World Cup, maybe that was as good as it gets. That's a very cynical way of looking at it. But at some point, you have to finish the chances, right? You don't get that many chances against top quality sides, and you have to finish. And if they can't, maybe it's a question of finding or pulling the trigger early and trying something else. We're 3 games in. I don't think we've ran the same idea over, but I think right now we have to look at the options and say, okay, can we find more sparks? We know this system is going to be very athletically demanding. We know this. There's no new surprise there. That being said, is there an opportunity where they can now start to finish, right? If you look at how they played, this is going to turn to the Belgium game, right? Well, they played so well against Belgium. Maybe they can now go and play Croatia well. Well, they played well against Argentina. They had moments against Argentina, and I'm always going to go back to that. There were too many defensive breakdowns for me to really say they played a solid game, a good performance. Because at some point, if you are just giving 1v1 opportunities with your goalie and your goalie's making saves, or you're playing well defensively, or is your goalie standing on his head? Maxime Crépeau was standing on his head. The what-ifs were there. You expect them, and maybe that comes with more opportunities and creativity. I don't see enough from this side outside the 18-yard box in terms of being threats. It seems to be a national team pandemic on both sides. Would love to see more threats from the 18-yard box and out. Because if everything has to be within the box, then, I mean, hey, you score goals in the dirty areas, to use the hockey analogy, but you need to be able to make them defend more. And maybe that gives them the opportunity to do so. So trying to find goals, shots, opportunities outside of that 18 is going to be paramount, because if 9 and 10 have to be within the 18 or within the 6 to have a chance, that's problematic. So I'm wondering if Marsh looks at his 9s and 10s and says, maybe I pull the trigger on them a little bit earlier. I wonder if he goes to that 3-person midfield. We'd have to wait and see. But overall, a fine performance. Not surprising. I think I'm not surprised by the result. I just need a goal, because I think the boys need a goal at this point. If they go another game, they're just going to be there. And maybe it's just a change in attitude of just taking on more. But they seem like a team that doesn't have confidence. And a lot of the players that you're relying on don't. And if that's the case, you're having the conversation, is a 60% of a certain player better than, say, a player that's playing in great form? What's the level? Can they perform? We'll have to wait and see. The next game is until next week. But an overall, not disappointed. Would have loved to see more. Saw some encouraging marks. But right now, I think for Canada, it's a bit of a regroup. There's too many what-ifs with it. 3 games in. But let's see how they adjust and get ready for the next game. Yeah, I think we'll wrap it up here. Let us know what you think in the comments. Also, like, share, comment, subscribe, notifications, all that fun stuff. Anyways, let's wrap it up here.